Hilchos Eiruvin Perek Shishi, the laws of the Eiruv, the mixing, chapter 6. Today we start a new section in these laws. Till now we talked about Eiruv Chatzerot, when you have people living in a courtyard together and they want to carry in the space that's shared. They have to make an Eiruv, they have to put food together and say, we're all joining together, as we saw at length in the last few chapters. Today, for the next 3 days, till we finish these laws, we're learning about Eiruv Techumin, the Eiruv of the border. Remember a couple of days ago, the end of Hilchos Shabbat, we talked about the Tchum Shabbat. You cannot go out of a city more than 2,000 amot, more than 2,000 cubits, about 3,000 feet. And we define what's called the city, and if you have extensions to the city. But the bottom line is, if you start Shabbos in a city, you cannot leave.
Square kilometer?
About, yeah. Outside of, you can't go that length out of a city. Today it's a bit more complex because today cities go into cities. If you go down Ventura Boulevard, Sherman Oaks turns into Studio City, turns into the next neighborhood. So you don't really have outside of a city. But if you travel further out, you could have this problem. I was just now in Israel and was speaking to my in-laws, and my father-in-law mentioned that one time one of his kids was born on Shabbos, and he wanted to walk back from the hospital so he can give her the name on that day because it was a girl. So you go to the Torah and you call the Torah, you give the name. And only after Shabbos he realized that he had walked outside of the Tchum. Because between the hospital, Tel HaShomer, and Kfar Chabad, was you end up going in a space where there's nothing. So you have that issue of the Tchum. So it could be quite practical today. So today, starting today, going for the next few days, the Rambam will discuss a trick or a mechanism that the rabbis made that would allow you to walk further than those 2,000 amos. Says the Rambam, Halacha Aleph. Misha yotza min hamedina be'erev Shabbos. Somebody leaves a city on Friday, and he puts down enough food for 2 meals within the border of Shabbos, but it's outside of the city. So in this picture, we're going to use the diagram of 1,000 amos. Okay, here's the edge of the city, and he puts down food. He walks 1,000 amos before Shabbos, and he puts down food at that point. And he decides that I'm establishing Shabbos over there. Instead of accepting Shabbos where I live in the city, for me, Shabbos is starting over there, where I put my food. Even though you're going to go back to the city before Shabbos, and you're going to sleep in your house on Shabbos, Nechshav Oisai, or Nachshav Oisai, halacha considers him as though he accepted Shabbos in the place where he put down the 2 meals. This is what's called the Eiruv Techumin, the mixing of the borders. Typically his border would be at 2,000 amot. Now he mixes the borders because now he puts some food over there, and a space that wouldn't be able to be walked by him is able to be walked. Yeah, he has to put it before Shabbos.
Yeah, he says that, but where? In a field? What?
Yeah, you can put it anywhere. In the middle of nowhere. We'll soon see some definitions about it. But yeah, you put it down somewhere. Halacha beis. And then the next day, you go to find your food, and you can walk from there 2,000 amot to every direction, instead of your house being in the city. And you can only walk from the city 2,000 amot every direction. Here we're going to call where your food is. That's where you can walk 2,000 amos to every direction. Lefichach, therefore, you get a little leniency, but also a little stringency. You get a leniency in that you can walk further that way. But now you get a stringency in where you can only walk less this way. When you walk your 2,000 amot from your Eiruv in the direction of the city, you can only walk in the city until where the 2,000 amot ends. Remember this principle also from chapter 27 of Hilchos Shabbos. We talked about the fact that if you're walking from one city to another and the 2,000 amot ends within the next city, you have to stop there. Just because you're now in another city doesn't mean you can keep walking to the end of the city. Wherever your 2,000 amot stops, that's where it stops. Except if the entire city is within the 2,000, then we consider the whole city to be just 4 amot and you keep walking even past the second city. But assuming that the 2,000 amot ends in the middle of the city, that's where you have to stop. But if the entire city was within the 2,000 amot that you're allowed to walk from where your Eiruv started, the entire city will be considered just 4 amot, and you can complete your 2,000 amma walk outside. Another Rambam gives us practical applications of what this means, each of the cases. Halacha Gimel Keta, what does this look like? You put down your Eiruv 1,000 amas away from your home, eastwards. All the commentaries explain, Rambam is talking about a case where your house is at the edge of the city. So we're talking about a guy who has a home right by the wall, and he puts his food down, his challah, 1,000 amma eastward. Nimtza, it turns out, Mahalich lemachar mimakay meruvay alpayim amma lemizrach. You can go another 2,000 ammas eastward after wherever you placed your Eiruv. So technically from your house, you're going to end up walking 3,000 ammas. That way. But when it comes to walking westward, you can only walk 2,000 ammas from the point of the food. The 1,000 ammas goes from the Eiruv to your home at the wall of the city. The 1,000 amma mi beisay b'seich haMedina, and then another 1,000 ammas from your home within the city. You can only walk in the city till the end of the 1,000, because that's where your 2,000 ends. If you count the 2,000 from where you put your Eiruv down, you have 1,000 here, 1,000 here, and boom, you stop over here. That's where you're allowed to walk until. However, what if in this case you have another option over here? The whole city was less than 1,000 ammas. Haya, says the Rambam, mi beisay ad seif haMedina pachas mi'alef. From your home till the end of the city, there was less than 1,000 ammas. Afilu amma achas, even if it's just one less, like here in the picture, 999 ammas. So now, if you were going by the strict law, you can only walk 1,000 from the Eiruv to the house, 999, and one more outside the city. But no, since the entire city is within your techum, within your border, the whole thing is converted to just 4 amos, and you can walk another 996 ammas outside the city to the west. So it says the Rambam, let's do it again. From your home to the end of the city, there's less than 1,000 ammas. Afilu amma achas, even just one. Which means that if you went dryly, your 2,000 ammas would finish outside the city. The entire, city is considered like just 4 amot. You can complete the 2,000 by walking another 996 ammas to the west, and this way you get a lot more space, of course, that you're allowed to walk. Lefichach, says the Rambam halacha daled, if a guy made a mistake, not really a mistake, but this is the way he chose to do. You have over here. If you put your Eiruv down, the full 2,000 ammas away. Your home is here, you walk 2,000 ammas, you put your challah down over there. Hifsid called haMedina kula. You can now not even enter the city. You get nothing, because the 2,000 ends before the city begins. So you're stuck over there. Your techum, your border of Shabbos, is only here. You gain on that side, of course. You can walk another 2,000 that way. So if you need to meet somebody or you need to do something over there, that's good for you. You get 4,000 ammas outside of the city. But in terms of where you accept Shabbos, that goes after your challah. And so if it's 2,000 ammas to the city, you're done. You can't go into the city. Ume Eiruvay alpayim. So the nimtza, I'm sorry. So it turns out, Nahalich mi beisay ad Eiruvay alpayim amma. You can walk from your home to the Eiruv 2,000 ammas. Ume Eiruvay alpayim, and from your Eiruv you can walk another 2,000. Ve'enei mahalich mi beisay v'amedina l'ruach ma'irav afilu amma achas. But westward, you can't walk anything once you hit the city. Hamaniach Eiruvay b'reshus hayachid. What if you put down your Eiruv in a enclosed area? Afilu haisa medina gedela keninve. Even if it's a huge city, but it was all enclosed, like Ninveh. Afilu ir chareva ma'ara hara'uyel diyurin, or there was a destroyed city, so a pile of ruins, or a cave that couldn't be used by people for living purposes. Mehalech kula v'chutzala alpayim amma lechoruach. So then, your 2,000 amma doesn't start from where your challah is. I thought I had a diagram of this, but I don't. Let's say, see here, the place where you put your challah is kind of isolated. It's just standing there. So you only get 2,000 ammas from the challah. But if your challah was inside a city, a second city, so then that whole second city becomes the place where you accepted Shabbos, and you can walk 2,000 ammas outside of that city. So the challah kind of extends to the size of the entire city, then you begin your 2,000 from there. If you put your Eiruv down in the city in which you are spending Shabbos. So for whatever reason, this guy has a home over here, he puts his Eiruv over here. It's inside the confines of the city. Doesn't help him. He didn't do anything. We don't measure the 2,000 ammas from wherever he put down his Eiruv. he is considered to be like any other member of the city. Sheyesh lo alpayim amo l'chol ruach chutz lamedina. They can walk 2,000 amas outside of the city in every direction. Similarly, if you put your Eiruv in the places which are considered to be the extension of the city, remember this, in Perek Chavchet, chapter 28 of Shabbat, we learned that if you have a city, and within 70 amas you have another little structure, that structure is considered to be the border of the city. The whole city extends, and now the city ends over here, and everybody can walk 2,000 amas past that structure. So if you put your Eiruv in this structure, anyways, the border is being counted from past them. That's like putting it inside the city, and you're like a member of the city. You can walk 2,000 in every direction like any member of the city. Of course, if you put your Eiruv past 2,000 amas, it's not an Eiruv. So let's use this picture again over here. Here you put your challah exactly at 2,000. Let's say you put your challah at 2001. You can't get there on Shabbos. You can only walk the 2,000. So you don't get any extension based on that food. Halacha Vav says the Rambam a very important rule. This mechanism that we're talking about over here for allowing you to walk extra distances is not a free-for-all. You can only make this Eiruv if it's for a purpose of a mitzvah. Going, for example, you knew that in the next city there's a guy who has Shiva. You want to go visit him. Or a guy's making a party for his wedding. Or to greet your master teacher, or a friend that came from a long journey, or any similar cases. That's when you're allowed to make yourself allowed to walk further so you can reach this wedding or this Shiva house or whatever. Or you're doing it out of fear, a very reasonable fear. You were running away from idol-worshipping Gentiles or from robbers. They were coming to your city. You knew they're coming on Shabbos, so you set yourself up an escape route. I'm going to go to that city, so you put your challah down. But if you ended up doing the Eiruv after the fact for a different purpose, just to do some extra jogging, and some exercise or whatever, simply for optional matters, it's still considered to be an Eiruv. It's okay. But initially, you only do it for a mitzvah or to avoid fear. Halacha Zayin. What do you use for the Eiruv? So here in the picture we have challah. But the idea is it has to be food. And the Rambam says, what kind of food? Kol shemishtatfin bay. Any food that can be used in a shituf. Remember, the shituf was the idea of bringing a bunch of alleyways together, or bringing a whole city together. Any food that people can contribute towards the shituf, Eiruvin by Eiruv Techumin, can be used to create the Eiruv Techumin, the Eiruv of the borders. The Chol she'ein mishtatfin by any food which cannot be used as part of the shituf, ein marvin by Techumin, you cannot use to make the Eiruv Techumin. The kama shir Eiruv Techumin, how much food has to be put down? So the Rambam already mentioned it before in passing. Now he says it clearly. Every person partaking in the Eiruv has to put down enough food to cover 2 meals for himself. If he's using condiments or things that you eat along with bread, enough that would be eaten during the course of 2 meals. That's how much you put away for the Techumin Eiruv. Kamaya shituf, the same rules as the shituf apply over here. You and your Eiruv have to be in one place when Shabbos begins. So it can be technically possible for you to eat it in the twilight zone between Friday and Shabbos. Now the commentators explain, it doesn't mean you have to actually be there. You put your challah down over there, you don't have to stand there when Shabbos comes in. Of course, the whole idea is you're going to go sleep in your house and then walk there later. But the idea is it has to be in a place that had you been there, you could have access to it on Shabbos. Let's say if it was a public domain where you couldn't walk 4 amot, you're 4 amot away, that wouldn't work. The Fichach says the Rambam, therefore, if you wanted to begin your Shabbos in a public domain, and you ended up putting your Eiruv down in a private domain, or you're beginning Shabbos in a private domain, and you're putting your Eiruv food in a public domain, this cannot be considered an Eiruv. The only way to transfer something from a private domain to a public domain, or the opposite way, at the twilight zone of Shabbos, is only if you do a transgression. You can't do it on Shabbos. Therefore, it wouldn't work as an Eiruv. Aval says the Rambam but if you wanted to begin Shabbos in a private domain or a public domain, and you put your Eiruv food down in a Carmelis, which is like a not here nor there type of domain, it's only forbidden rabbinically. Or you want to begin Shabbos in the not here nor there domain, the Carmelist domain. And you put your Eiruv down in a proper biblical, private or public domain. That's allowed as an Eiruv. Because there's a principle we learned before a couple of times. At the moment when the Eiruv goes into effect, Shehu ben Ashmashas, twilight zone between Shabbos and Friday, Mutar lehoitzi ulehachnis mikol achas mishtei reshuyos lekarmelis ledvar mitzvah. The rabbi is allowed one to carry from a Carmelist to any of the other domains if it's for a mitzvah purpose. Shekol davar shu midivrei seifrim, any rabbinic enactments on the Shabbos, legazru alav ben ashmashas b'mkay mitzvah b'shas hadchak. The rabbi said we're not going to apply it during twilight or under pressing circumstances if you're doing a mitzvah. Sorry, we're not going to apply it during twilight if you're doing a mitzvah or it's pressing circumstances. So because the whole idea is that the Eruv has to be in an accessible place at twilight, and in twilight it's accessible to go to a Carmelist, the rabbis dispensed with their decrees, so you can have an Eruv going in that way, which will help you walk on the Shabbos. Halacha Yud, Nusane b'migdal v'nal. You put it in a little chest, and you lock the chest. V'avadam mafteach, and you lost the key. We had a similar case a couple days ago when it came to Eiruv Techumin. When it came to Eiruv Chatzerot, same thing. You lose access. The food is there. It didn't get destroyed, but the access is lost. If you can get out of the chest without doing any biblical work, it counts as an Eiruv. Because the only thing which is forbidden to do during twilight is a biblical labor. And as long as you're avoiding it, you're good. If you put your Eiruv food at the top of a reed or the top of a pole that are growing from the earth, so it hasn't been detached yet, it's actual, let's say a bamboo, it's live, and you put it on top of that, Einoi Eiruv. That's not an Eiruv. Even though you can just go, pull off your food. We're worried you might actually come to uproot the reed from the ground, which is biblically forbidden.
What is kundas?
Huh? Kundas is like a bamboo, like a live growing stick. They translate here shaft.
Okay.
So kaneh is a reed, kundas is a shaft. The idea is growing things that stand and can hold things on top of them. But if these shafts or reeds were already picked out of the ground and just put back in for whatever purpose, and now you put your food on top of that, that's an Eiruv, that's okay. Because even if you come to uproot it, it's not biblically forbidden. It's not attached to the ground. Halacha Yud Aleph. Kol hamaniach Eiruvai yesh le b'mkayim Eiruvai arba ames. Whenever you put your Eiruv down, we give you a bit of leeway, free space, 4 amot of free space. Lefichach, therefore, hamaniach Eiruvai Techumin shalai b'seif hatchum. Again, using this picture here, you put your Eiruv down at the end of the 2,000 amos, exactly right there. V'nizgalgel ha'Eiruv v'yatza chutz l'tchum b'seich shtei ames. And then the challah gets a life of its own, begins to roll, and it rolls 2 amas out. Eruv. It's still considered to be an Eiruv, and it hasn't left its place. Since you put it down in a legal place, and it rolled out just 2 amot, that's fine. But if it left more than 2 amot, it rolled further, now you lost the Eiruv. Because the Eiruv is considered to be outside the border. And somebody who puts the Eiruv outside the border is not an Eiruv. You can't reach your Eiruv before on the Shabbos, it's past your 2,000 amos. Now, the Rambam said 4 amot before. Why is he saying 2? Because the idea is if you're in the middle of a square, you have 2 amot each way. So 2 amot this way, 2 amot that way is a total of 4 amot. Therefore, the food can only roll 2 amot. After it rolls past that, it's out. Halacha Yud Beis nisgalgel Eiruv v'yatza shtei amos chutz latchum. Let's say the Eiruv rolled out just 2 amas outside of the tchum. Oy avad oy nisraf, or it got lost or it got burnt. Or it was truma food, which is very holy, the 2% you give to the Kohen, and it became impure. And all of this stuff happened while it was still day. That's when Einoi Eiruv. That's when it's not considered an Eiruv. Because before Shabbos even came in, your Eiruv never went into effect. But if the food only rolled away after it got dark, or if it got destroyed or burnt up, or became ritually impure after it got dark, Harei ze Eiruv. It's still considered to be an Eiruv. Eiruv ben Ashmashas. When does the Eiruv go into effect? During twilight. If it was there during twilight, even if it disappeared later, you're good. V'im safek, what about if it's a doubt? You put it there, 4 p.m. on Friday afternoon, you go home. The next day you come to walk to your Eiruv, it's not there. You don't know when it happened. Did it get lost before Shabbos came in or after? Harei ze Eiruv. We're lenient. It's a kosher Eiruv. Shesveika Eiruv kosher. When you're in doubt about an Eiruv, it's kosher. Lefichach, therefore, im nechala Eiruv ben hashmashas harei Eiruv. If the Eiruv food was eaten up during the twilight zone, it's considered to be still an Eiruv, because during twilight it's in doubt. And so when you're in doubt about the doubt, you get a pass, and it's an Eiruv. Halacha Yud Gimel Amru Leishnayim. Two people told you like this: Tseva Arev Aleinu. Please go and make an Eiruv for us. Okay, so let's say me and Yitzchak Mendel, we knew that Amnon is traveling to the edge of the city on Shabbos. We said, you know what? We also want to travel tomorrow more than 1,000 amot. Here's some challah. Go put some food down for us. Echad Eirav alav mi ba'idyaim ve'echad Eirav alav ben hashmashos. Amnon's running late. He gets to the place 10 minutes before Shabbos. So he puts down the Eiruv for me while it's still day, and the Eiruv for Yitzchak Mendel he puts down in twilight, after sunset. V'zeh she'eirav alav mi ba'idyaim nechal Eiruvai ben hashmashos v'zeh she'eirav alav ben hashmashos nechal Eiruvai mishech hashecha. Now Moshe's over there. Nobody saw him. He was hiding behind the bushes. He's hungry. So Amnon puts down the two challahs, one for me, one for you. He comes and he eats the challahs. Both challahs. The challah that was put down for me while it was still day, he eats up during twilight. The challah that was put down for you by twilight, he eats up after dark. Says the Rambam, Shneim kanu Eiruv. Both Eiruv work. Both Eiruvs work. Sheben hashmasha safek, because the time of twilight zone is in doubt, and we use it for leniency in both cases. Usfeika Eiruv kosher. And when you're in doubt about the Eiruv, it's kosher. So since he put down the Eiruv for me while it was still day, and you ate it up in twilight, we say, oh, by twilight it was already dark. The Eiruv already worked, so it's good. But then when we look at the other one and we say, hey, the Eiruv was put down by twilight, we say it's still day. And the Eiruv was put down by day, you only ate it up after dark, so we use the leniency both ways. Afal Pekei, nevertheless, even though we're lenient when it comes to the doubt, Safik Chashecha, Safik Le Chashecha, when it's the twilight zone, and we're not sure if it's Friday or Shabbos yet, Ein Ma'arvin Eiruv Techumin Lechatchila. Don't go ahead and put your Eiruv down there initially. If you did, it's an Eiruv, but again, avoid it. Try doing it by day, try having it done before Shabbos comes in. Halacha Yudalit. Okay, we're going to return to our favorite, our Geschmacke stone foliage. Look at that. The whole avalanche comes down. Aha, Geschmack. Nafal al ha'eruv gal mi ba'idyaim. If an avalanche falls on your Eiruv food while it's still day. Uh-oh, what happened to my screen over here? Nafal al ha'eruv gal mi ba'idyaim. If an avalanche falls onto your Eiruv food while it's still day, and it's covered. So the food is still there, but it's not accessible. Kind of like the lost key before. If you can get it out from under the stones without doing any biblical work, it's kosher. Because in the time when the Eiruv takes effect, twilight zone, you can get it out without doing biblical work. But if the avalanche only fell after it got dark, then for sure it's for sure considered to be an Eiruv, even if you can only get it out with doing biblical work, because when twilight came, it was fully accessible. If you don't know when the avalanche fell, before dark or after, kosher. Again, we go with leniency. We say it's kosher. Shesfeika Eiruv kosher. When you're doubt about Eiruv, you go kosher. Halacha tezvav. Avolim Eiruv bitruma shehi safek tmeya. What about if you took truma food? Say Eliezer, David is a kohen, so he can eat truma food. Somebody gave you truma food, and you want to use this truma food for the Eiruv. But instead of the last case where you used kosher truma and you're not sure if it became ritually impure before Shabbos or after, the food already was in a state of doubt. The truma food had a doubt about it, if it was ritually impure or not. And now you go and put it down initially as your Eiruv, ein Eiruv. That's not an Eiruv. She'ein suda haruya, because the kohen who can eat the truma, he can't eat it. It's in doubt whether you're ritually impure or not. Or if David goes into his kitchen and he has two loaves, one kosher, pure truma, one impure truma. And he doesn't know which is the pure one. So he takes them both, puts them down where he wants to walk, 2,000 amas, and he says, I want my Eiruv to be in the pure loaf, whichever one it is. It's not an Eiruv. Because he can't go and eat one of them. He doesn't know which one is impure, so he's in doubt. So because he doesn't have a proper edible meal, he can't declare an Eiruv over it. Halacha Tazayin Amar, if he says, Kikar zu hayom chaylo l'machar kaidash. Okay. In the 6th book of the Rambam, we're going to talk about the concept of hektish, where you can take something and make it holy for the Beit HaMikdash. And also later, in later books as well. So, when you declare something holy for the Beit HaMikdash, you cannot use it anymore. There's a whole section of laws in the 8th book of the Rambam about that. It's called mi'ilah, sacrilege. Once you declare something holy, you can't benefit from it. Now, a person has the power to declare sanctity to come about in the future. So a guy takes his challah, he walks to the 2,000 amas where he wants to put his Eiruv down on Friday, and he says like this, Kikar zu hayom chaylo l'machar kaidash. This loaf today is mundane, tomorrow it's going to become holy. The Eirav ba, and he uses it as an Eiruv. Harei is Eiruv, it's a kosher Eiruv. Shebein hashmasha is adayin leniskat shavadai, because the twilight zone between Friday and Shabbos, when the Eiruv takes effect, it hadn't become fully holy yet, because it wasn't fully Shabbos yet. And it was edible while it was still day, because it was still mundane. It only became holy on Shabbos. But if you said the opposite, today I want it to be holy, tomorrow I want it to be mundane, but you cannot make the Eiruv with it, because it's only going to become mundane once it gets dark. During twilight zone, it's still considered to be day, it's still considered to be holy. When it's holy, you can't eat it. It's not edible, it's not an Eiruv. And therefore, you can't use it as an Eiruv. Also, if a person separates truma, he has a whole crop of apples or produce, and he separates the 2%. He's going to give it to the kohen. But he says, I only want it to become truma once it gets dark. Ein marvin, but you cannot use it as an eruv. Because the entirety of the twilight zone, it remains tevel, it remains untithed, and it's unedible. No Jew can eat tevel. And the rule is that the food has to be edible while it's still day. If a person puts down his Eruv food in a cemetery, it doesn't work. It's forbidden to derive benefit from a cemetery. And since you want the Eruv to stay there to last after it goes into effect, you're deriving benefit from the cemetery, which is not allowed. In the Sunday, but if you put it into a beis hapras, okay, this is a concept we're going to develop in the 10th book of the Rambam at length. A beis hapras means an area, a field, which used to have a grave. We know somebody was buried there. Then somebody took a plow, charashoto, you plowed it very well, and now we don't know where the grave is anymore. And we're worried that perhaps some of the bones of the skeleton made it all over the field. And the rule when it comes to impurity is that even if you have a barley corn, etzem kiseora, a bone the size of a barley corn makes you impure. So you have to worry that everywhere in the beis hapras, maybe you're going to touch a bone. So when you walk there, you're considered to be in doubt, ritually impure out of doubt. So it's not really a cemetery because there's no real grave, but it could be that there's a grave there. It could be there's some bones there. It says the Rambam, Nestone bebeis hapras, if you put your Eiruv in this beis hapras, hareze Eiruv. It is a viable Eiruv. Va'afilu haya kohen, even if you're a kohen who cannot walk into a cemetery. Because we know that we're allowed to go into a beit hapras either if you fly over it or if you blow your way through. The whole issue is to walk on it because you might step on a bone. But if you fly over it, the Rambam says a flying chest. But today we know this is an airplane. This is a very practical case.
Carpet.
Magic carpet. You fly on the magic carpet, you go over the beit hapras, it's okay. Or you can blow your way through, means if you literally go very slowly, step by step, and you blow the dust on the floor and make sure that there's no bone, and you take a step only where there's no bone, one at a time, you can get through technically, without touching any ritual impurity. So therefore, you can make it through. So it's an Eiruv, it's a kosher Eiruv. Halacha Yud Ches. Rabim sheratzu lehishtatev be'Eiruv Techumin. A multitude of people want to make a one combined border Eiruv. We all want to go to the wedding. Sheva Brachas taking place in the next city. So we're all going to join to make our Eiruv. Mekabtzin kulan Eiruvan. Everybody puts together their food. Shtei sudes l'chol echad ve'echad. 2 meals worth for every single person. Umanichin esei b'kli echad b'makim sheyirtzu. Put it into one vessel, one container, wherever you want it to be. V'im asa echad Eiruv al yedei kulan. If one person makes the Eiruv for everybody, you must make what's called a kinyan, actively acquire the food on their behalf. So if we all want to go to the wedding in the next city, and we all say, you know what, Moshe, you go buy us some food, we're not going to give you fish and challah. You go to the store, buy us one big salmon fish, and make an Eiruv for us. So he has to lift it up with somebody else's help and say, this is going to be for Amnon, this is going to be for me, this is going to be for Yitzchak Mendel. You have to lift it up for every single person. V'tzarich l'haidiyam, and you have to let them know. She'ein ma'arvin le'la'adam Eiruv Techumin ala l'daita. You can only make a Techumin Eiruv for somebody with his consent. Shema ein eireitza la'arev ba'isa haruach sheratza zeh. Because maybe he won't want that direction. We have a rule in halacha that you can do something good for somebody without his knowledge. You help him carry in the shared space without his knowledge, it's okay. But to do an Eiruv Techumin, even though it's in a way good, because you let him walk further that way, but you limit his walking this way. So you have to let him know to make sure that he's okay with getting limited on this side and getting the bonus on that side. If you let him know while it's still day that you're making the Eiruv for him, even if he only agrees once it gets dark, right, say you send him a WhatsApp message, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Friday, hey, I'm making an Eiruv for you. No response. Friday night you see him in shul. He says, oh, by the way, I got your text. I like the Eiruv. It's okay. But if you only let him know after it got dark, he cannot use it. Because you cannot establish an Eiruv once it gets dark. You test. Anybody who can serve as an acquirer for the courtyard Eiruv, can be used as an acquirer for the Techumin Eiruv, like your adult child or somebody else, a friend, even your wife could work. But if the courtyard Eiruv if you can't use him as an acquirer when it comes to the courtyard Eiruv, you also can't use him for the Techumin Eiruv, like a kid or a maidservant also cannot be used, for example. Halacha chaf. A person can give some money to a homeowner. You say, here's $10, go buy me some food, make me an Eiruv. But if you go to the store owner or a baker, and you say, acquire for me an Eiruv with this money, it's not an Eiruv. The commentaries get into over here, it has to do with some laws that we're going to learn in the 12th book of the Rambam about acquisition. When you acquire something with money, you only actually acquire it according to halacha when you do meshicha, when you pull the object into your possession. Just giving the money doesn't work. It doesn't acquire the thing. So because you only gave him money and you're saying, here, acquire for me the Eiruv, and you haven't actually gotten the food, so you can't use him to make your Eiruv. But if the words you used was not acquire, you said, make me an Eiruv. Here's $10, make me an Eiruv. Then the store owner could take the money, buy some food, and make an Eiruv. Because here you're not asking him to acquire the Eiruv through the money. You're saying, here, I'm giving you money, take care of the Eiruv for me. That's okay. There's no issue of acquisition here. If he gave him a cup, and he said to him, here, put some crackers in here, put some bread in here, and make me the Eiruv. Acquire it for me. Again, you can do it over here, because here you're actually getting the food. You're putting the food into the container which belongs to you, and he's making Eiruv. That's okay. A person can make an Eiruv, border Eiruv, for his young kids or for his goyish, non-Jewish slaves and maidservants. Bein midaitan, bein shlei midaitan, whether they agree or not. For your own family members, if they're under bar mitzvah or they're not Jewish, you can make an Eiruv for them, even against their will. Therefore, in Eirav alei and ve'ervu la'atzman, if you made an Eiruv for them and they made an Eiruv for themselves, you have a 7-9-year-old boy, he also wants to walk the next day, he puts some challah down in one direction, you put it down in the other direction. Yaitzin b'shal rabban, they go with their master, they go with the father. But for your wife, for your adult children, for your Jewish slaves, you can only make an Eiruv for them if they agree. Even though they rely on you for food, you don't get to dictate where they walk on Shabbos. If you made an Eiruv for them, and they heard about it, and they were quiet without protest, they can use your Eiruv. If you made an Eiruv for them in one direction, they make an Eiruv for themselves in another direction, that's the biggest protest. There is no bigger protest than that. They're literally actively going against what you did. The Yaitzin be'Eiruv Atzman, therefore they get to fulfill their obligation, and they get to use the Eiruv which they made for themselves. Katan ben sheishanim mepaches, a kid less than 6 years old, 6 years old or less, Yaitzei be'Eiruv imay, can use the Eiruv made by his mother. You don't even have to put food for him. He's so reliant on his mother that he can be included with her Eiruv. Chav Beis. Haretza l'shaleach Eruv b'yad acher lahaniche le b'makim shoretza l'kbeya shvisas sham. You don't want to go yourself to the point where your Eruv is going to be. You send somebody else to put your food down where you want to begin Shabbos. Harishus b'yada, you have the option. Ukeshehu mishalche. When you do send it though, you must send it with a guy who himself is obligated in mitzvahs. You cannot send it with the hands of a deaf mute or a mentally unstable person or a child, or in the hands of somebody who doesn't agree to the rabbinic mechanism of the Eiruv. If you sent it with them, it's not an Eiruv. But if you gave it to a non-kosher guy, deaf mute, one of these guys, and you told him to bring it to another guy who is kosher for this mission, so he will go and then put it in the place of the Eruv. Is that kosher? That's kosher. Even if you put food on top of an elephant or a monkey, and you tell him to go give it to that guy who's going to put it down for you, it's okay. But you have to supervise. Stand from far, till you watch the disqualified person or the animal. Once they reach the kosher guy who you told to put the Eruv down, you're good. The same thing applies if you have a group of people. They're all making an Eruv together, and they send it with one person. That guy has to be a kosher person, and if he is, you can send it and it's okay. One guy or a few people told one person, go make an Eruv for us. They didn't say which way, they didn't say where, so it's up to him. And he makes the Eruv whatever he wants, in the north, let's say, or in the east. It's an Eruv and they can all use it. Because they didn't tell him which direction. He gets to choose. If you tell your friend, make me an Eruv with dates. And instead he goes and takes dried figs and makes the Eruv. Or dried figs, and he goes uses other food, he uses dates. If you told him, put my Eruv in a chest. He puts it in a birdhouse instead. He said, put it in a birdhouse. He puts it in a chest. You say, put it in the first floor. He puts it in the second floor. You tell him, put it in the second floor, puts it in the first floor. In all these cases, he didn't follow the instructions. It's not an Eruv. But if he said, make me an Eruv, just with no stipulation, and he makes the Eruv, no matter what he uses, figs or dates, no matter where he puts it, ground floor or second floor, it's all an Eruv. It's the same way there's a blessing that we make on the courtyard Eruv and on the alleyway shared mechanism. There's also a blessing that we make on the Eiruv Techumin. Same thing, al mitzvat Eruv, that's the blessing that you make. After you make the blessing, you say, through this Eruv food, it's going to be allowed for me to walk to this place, plus 2,000 amas in every direction. If one guy was saying an Eruv for many people, he should say, with this Eruv food, it'll be permitted for this guy, or for these people, or for the members of this city, to walk from this place 2,000 amas every direction, and that's how you fulfill the mitzvah of making the Eiruv Techumin.